In this video, I'm gonna share with you an idea or a dream that I've had since 2001, which is basically to have a gaming room in the house. So for 21 years, I've been buying, collecting, hoarding, storing, trying not to break as many consoles and games as I can. And finally, in 2021, I was able to convert 2 rooms in the house to 2 gaming rooms that have a lot of consoles, computers, arcades, and a lot of memorabilia from my childhood and teenage years from the 80s and 90s. So basically they are nothing fancy. It's not a fancy gaming room. It's not a fancy setup. It's just something personal that I enjoy and I want to make a video, so hopefully you guys can enjoy it with me. My name is Rakan and let's begin.
Welcome to the Lion's House.
So let's start first by a quick overview of the room. Basically all the furniture, most of it were bought from IKEA, and like any good gaming room, we need a big screen TV. That's a TCL 4K HDR super duper 60 frames. Then let's start from the first part of the room, which is the back of the door, that has a lot of books. Those books were basically authored by my late father, may he rest in peace, and by my mother, may she enjoy a well and happy life. You can see that some of the books are translated to English and some of them are even translated to French. So those are basically a very personal memory because, again, they were written by my mother and my father. So you'll never see them in any other game room. I can guarantee that. Then on the next wall, like any good One Piece fan, I have the 4 swords of Roronoa Zoro, or katanas, whatever you want to call them, of my favorite character, Zoro. I love that guy. So basically these are the 4 swords, replica of them, hanging on the walls. Under them we have the special editions or colorful editions from the PS5 controllers and the Xbox Series controllers, and the Duke that was released recently as a special edition. I think maybe it was by Hyperkin or something, I'm not sure. Then the 2 headsets for the PS5 and the Xbox, and the first arcade one-up machine, the Capcom arcade, the Capcom Legacy arcade that mainly features Pac-Man. And on the other side, the controllers of the previous generation, the Xbox One, the PlayStation 4, the basically even the previous generations, the GameCube, the Wavebirds, the Xbox 360 with the keyboard, the PS5 with the keyboard, and a couple of Nintendo Wii remote controls with the special editions from Mario, Luigi, Peach, and Toad. Some controller holders, Spyro holding the PS5 controller, Crash Bandicoot holding the PS4, and the Pokemon Pokeball. Then the collector edition figure from Far Cry 5. The magnificent collector's edition controller for the Resident Evil 4 game. I have the PS4 edition, not the GameCube one. Then the collector's edition figure of God of War, the first one, featuring Kratos and his son. Then Mario as a controller holder, holding the Switch controller, then, or part of it. Then the Hulk controller holder holding the Xbox Series X controller. Then again the headsets on the wall. Underneath those we have the PS5, the Xbox Series X, the Switch OLED, and a hand gesture of the NWO Wolfpack for those wrestling fans out there. And of course the vintage speaker that goes with the cassette player that you'll see just in a couple of minutes. Then the mini consoles, the TurboGrafx 16, the Amiga 500, the Neo Geo Mini, and underneath those we have that large, huge, big-ass VHS player by National that was very famous in the 80s. Just listen to that noise. That pop is magnificent, man. Next to it is the other slim console, mini consoles, the Famicom, the PS1, the Super Nintendo, and the NES, and then the cassette player, the vintage one that was made in the 70s, that the speakers attached to. Continuing with the minis, the Atari Mini, the Commodore 64 Mini, and the Mega Drive Mini. Underneath those, the DVD player, with the whole Friends series from the first season to the last season on DVD format that I was buying weekly when they were released. On top of that, the Retron 5 and the Hyperkin 77, if I'm not mistaken. Next to it, the Victrix with a bunch of games and modded game basically that contains all the softwares for the console, and the other speaker on the other side of the CRT, the wooden framed CRT. On the other side, we have the Heroes Season 1 and Season 2, because those are the 2 seasons that matter. The others are bad. Then the Special Edition Fast and Furious, up to 7 movies, the Special Edition Ninja Turtles DVDs, and the Special Edition Scooby-Doo DVD set. And then the High School Musical TV. I don't like the movies, but I like the TV. It looks very nice. And the DVD player. Then the Winnie the Pooh Disney CRT with the DVD player, and the Rush Hour Special Edition. Next to it, the Spider-Man TV with a DVD player, the Simpsons TV that usually is featured in my videos, a couple of Pokemon figures, and the Mickey Disney CRT with the VHS player and DVD player, and a couple of VHS cassette players. Now, going to the consoles, starting with the Atari 2600, the wooden one with the the big 6 they call it, I guess, and then the wooden one with the 4 keys, then the black one, the Darth Vader one, when they started calling it the Atari 2600, and finally the Atari 2600 Junior. And underneath those, you can see the wooden Atari containers, basically. That one is actually the original one. That was released in the 80s. I got it from one of my relatives, and the other one I bought it off eBay. Underneath those, we have the Atari 5200, and with the lovely controller that always breaks, and a couple of games. And next to it, we have the Atari Jaguar with a couple of games and 2 controllers. Underneath those, we have the competition for the Atari 2600, the ColecoVision with the Atari 2600 attachment basically, and a couple of games in the background for both the ColecoVision and the Intellivision. And on top of those, we have the Intellivision itself with the lovely wooden frame. I think this is the first version, the version 1. And again with a couple of Intellivision games underneath it, in box, which is rare to find in the Middle East. Then underneath it, the Fairchild Channel F, the Saba edition that was released in Europe. Again, it was the first console to play cartridges, so I had to have it with a couple of cartridge releases for it. And the Bailey's Astrocade or the Bailey Arcade, the one with the wooden frame with the controllers, and a special cartridge that contains all the games that are released for the console. Then underneath those, we have the Odyssey 300 and the Odyssey 500, which were released by Magnavox just to fill the gap between the Magna Odyssey 1 and 2. So the 300 and 500, I did not collect any others because these are the ones that actually matter for all collectors. And next to the shelves, we have the Xbox Series X fridge, which mainly holds, I think, 6 cans of Pepsi or Cola. So just for decoration, I don't really use it, but it's there, it's in the corner. Then going back to the consoles, we have the Atari 7800, the Pro version, and the Junior or the second version. And you can see that the Pro version is a little bit broken or shattered basically from the corner. That is a result of the shipping company being very careless with it. One of my relatives and I just sat down and we glued it together. It works. It just has a little bit of scratches basically on the side. And then the twin Famicom, and with the original Famicom, the second shelf, with a couple of Famicom games, the Super Mario Brothers 1, 2, 3, and the Zelda and Detective Conan game. Then the Nintendo Entertainment System with a couple of games, and a very, 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 very special NES console that you will never see in any other channel because it was custom made here in Saudi Arabia by an Instagram fellow called Gamers Castle. He actually did it by hand. He drew the whole thing. He carved the Mario, and it works. It's functional. So it's a lovely addition to the game room. And underneath those, we have a couple of basically Gen 1 consoles, highlighted by the Radofin in the back, because it was basically a transition between the Gen 1 and Gen 2. It's Gen 1 graphics, but raised some cartridges. So yeah, those were not famous. I just bought them because I like how they look. And the three failed consoles, the Ouya, the Steam Link, and the Mattel HyperScan are in the last shelf. And of course, we know how those did in the market. But again, if you're going for a complete collection, you have to own those. Going back, now the Atari Pong and the Telstar Pong, or the Telstar console. And behind those, a couple of boxed games for the 7800 and a lot of games for the Atari 2600, highlighting the Pac-Man games and the Donkey Kong games. Underneath that is the Magnavox Odyssey, the first console to ever be released, a 1972 version, with box, in-box, with all the accessories, with the controllers, fully working, and I have a video of it in the channel that's like 40 minutes long. Underneath that, the Nintendo consoles that nobody talks about, the TV Game 6, the TV Game 15, and the Racing 112 or 112, which are basically Gen 1 consoles that were released by Nintendo, I guess. And especially the Racing one was really hard to find. Then underneath those, from Nintendo to Sega, we have the Sega Mark 1, Mark 2, and Mark 3. The Sega Mark 2 and 3 are in box. You can see the boxes behind them, but the Sega Mark 1, I was barely able to find it in good condition, working, so beggars can be choosers. I didn't get the box. With a couple of games here and there in box underneath them. All of them are working, surprisingly, but they are very expensive, very hard to find. They basically were the very late additions to the collection. I did not buy them until I had everything else, and then I went for them. And underneath those, we have the Genesis or the Mega Drive versions. The first one, the Sega Genesis that was released basically everywhere. Then the Genesis 2, the second version, and the Genesis 3 that was only released in the US. And behind those, the 32X and the Mega CD, the attachment for the Sega Mega Drive or the Sega Genesis, and a couple of controllers and the arcade stick for the Sega Genesis. And going back on top, we have the PC Engine with the CD attachment and the multi-tap connector, a couple of controllers. And underneath that is the PC Engine Dio RX, if I'm not mistaken, that already had the CD drive embedded in it, and it was very fast in loading, much faster than the original PC Engine with whatever connection you have. Underneath those, we have the Sega Master System, the first version, and the modification, the second version. That's actually the version that we got here in the Middle East. So the first Sega name, that brand name that became popular here, was the Master System, followed by the Mega Drive. And of course, figure for Sonic that came, I think, with Sonic colors, if I'm not mistaken, the collector's edition. Underneath those is the Super Nintendo, the US version, and the PAL version, which looks exactly the same as the Super Famicom. And behind that is the Game Boy connector that plays Game Boy games for the Super Nintendo, and the Super Boy that was released not that recently, but it was a new release that can actually play Super Nintendo games in handheld format. Underneath that is the Neo Geo, which is very expensive, super expensive. Even the games are very expensive, so I only have that game for it, the arcade stick. But I had to add it to the collection. It's a lovely piece of history. And underneath that is the Sega Saturn, which was, in my opinion, the failure of Sega, the beginning of failure of Sega. And I think that's the shared opinion with many other players here. So the Sega Saturn with the two controllers, the first one and the one that looks like a spaceship. And then next to that is the Mega Jet, which is a Sega console that was released only in Japan, that connects to the screens in the airplane, where you can play Sega games Basically, it was a handheld that did not have a screen, that you relied on the airplane screen. That came before the Sega Nomad. Then the Sega Nomad was released after that. Then going back on top, we have the PlayStation 1, the original version, the original release with a couple of memory cards and controllers, and the PS1 Mini, Slim, whatever you want to call it, the second release, and the ASCII arcade stick in the back. Underneath those, we have the Nintendo 64 version, the gray one, the original one that was popular everywhere, with the controller and a couple of loose games, and the Rumble Pack. And in front of them is the Nintendo 64 Pikachu edition or Pokemon edition that was released in Japan. This is the Japanese version because I like the blue color in the Japanese version more than the American version. So I went for that, and it's very easy to mod to make it region free. Underneath those, we have the CDI consoles, the Telelaser 2000. I never seen it in any game room tours, to be honest. I've never seen anybody talk about it. I think that was mainly in the Middle East. I'm not sure about that. But the one that's famous is the Philips CDI, and the one I have is the 450 or 4500 version. Underneath that, we have the Neo Geo CD-Z, which is the second version after the Neo Geo, with the two controllers and an arcade stick for the Neo Geo X, which is an interesting console because basically it was a Switch before there was a Switch. So you can either play it in handheld format, or you can actually stick it inside the console and play it on a TV. So it's actually a very unique console by Neo Geo company called Neo Geo X. And underneath those, we have the VTech consoles. Again, they are consoles for kids. I know they are educational games mainly, but they are gaming consoles. So I have the VTech Smile and the VTech Smile Pro. The games are not that bad. They are just educational, but they are not that bad. So here are a bunch of games for that VTech, the Smile one, and the VTech Pro is, but it was in CD format. Then here's another version of PlayStation 1 that again is very unique to the collection because it was created by the same guy who created the Nintendo Entertainment System version, the Mario one. This is a Crash Bandicoot one that he drew, he curved by hand, and again I think only him and myself have it in the collection. And in front of that is the Last Guardian figure with the PlayStation 4 Pro 500 million edition, if I'm not mistaken. This is edition 23,447 out of 50,000. Underneath that is the Xbox 360 Star Wars edition with the Kinect and the controller, and a figure of Marcus from Gears of War. And then we have the PlayStation 3 Special Edition, the One Piece Special Edition, which is golden color with a gold controller. So it's a lovely console because I love One Piece. And with the trophies, the bronze, the silver, the gold, and the platinum trophy for, those PlayStation fans, the trophy hunters or the achievement hunters. Then we have the 3DOs, the 3DO Gold Star, and the Panasonic 3DO with a couple of controllers. At the last shelf, we have the Amiga CD32, which is modded to hell. It has a lot of modifications, has a lot of components added to it. It basically have all the games already pre-installed. It comes with a mouse. Basic mine came with a mouse and a controller, and it was very expensive, but it's a lovely console. Then we have the Tower PlayStation 2, the black one, the original version, and the special edition that I think was the GT special edition. That was released in Japan. This is Japanese version with a remote control and a couple of memory cards and a couple of controllers, and the PS2 Slim in front. And underneath that is the Sega Dreamcast, the Japanese version, with a couple of games and a couple of controllers and accessories with controller holders in the shape of Sonic, Knuckles, and Tails. The Dreamcast was a really lovely console. Not see a lot of love here in the Middle East. Then the Xbox, the original one, you can see that I've modded mine, the black one. That's actually a console that I had when I was a kid, with the Duke controller and the second version of the controller. I'm not sure what's that called. Underneath that is the Xbox original, the Crystal version. This is the PAL version. And in the bottom shelf is the black GameCube that I had in my teenage years, with the Game Boy Advance connector and the memory card, of course, and the adapter for the Wavebirds. And next to it is the purple version that I've modded, so I don't have to buy those very expensive GameCube games, which I've bought some of them, but I cannot buy all of them. So a modded one is the easiest solution. And underneath that we have the Wii, the standard version, and the black Wii U version. And here we have the Xbox 360 Elite and the original Xbox 360 that I've had since it was released. It didn't get a red ring of death, thank God. Hopefully it will never get it, but it survived so far, so it's a good console. And then the PlayStation Vita TV, if I'm not mistaken, that's what it's called. And behind it is the fat PlayStation 3, and the underneath it is the slim PlayStation 3, which is the one that basically sold the most here in the Middle East, and I think all over the world. The best edition of the PlayStation 3 is the second one. Then here's the Atari, the Atari VCS that was released in 2020, which is basically an Android box that's supported by Atari. And underneath it is the original Xbox One, the one with the lovely press conference where Xbox screwed everything up. And behind those is the Xbox trophy and controllers for the Atari VCS. And then the original PlayStation 4, the black colored one, and underneath it is the PlayStation 4 Slim, if I'm not mistaken, the white version. And finally the Xbox Series X, and next to it is the Switch Lite Pokemon Edition in box. I didn't see any need to open it, to be honest, but it's in box. So those are basically the consoles that I have in the first room, from the Odyssey all the way up to the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5. And now we're gonna go to the second wall, or the third wall basically. First, we'll start with the magnificent flag of World of Warcraft, the Horde side, of course. I've played that game for over 10 years, and I have to represent the Horde side. Cannot play Alliance. Horde all the way, for the Horde. And here we have the collector edition helmet from Fallout. It's a lovely helmet. You actually can stick your head in it, and it changes the voice, which is nice if you add batteries to it. And this is a poster that I've created and printed it on canvas. Basically it blocks out the sunlight, and it acts as a lovely addition to the room. I've added a couple of games that I like with the logo of the channel, and in front of it is the flamethrower from the collector edition from the Far Cry 5 game. And apparently everybody who shows this item have to say that it doesn't actually work. It doesn't actually work. And then this is another figure from Dave Re-Reckoning, the special edition that was released on the PS4. And here's a figure of I forgot your name, the main character in Horizon Zero Dawn. So those are the collectibles on top of the cabinet. Now this cabinet has all the Sakhr computers that were released in the Middle East, which are basically a variation of MSX that was localized for the region. We have the first one that was ever released, which was called MSX AX100 or Sakhr AX100, and followed by AH200. Again, both of them were released in 1985, but nobody was sure what comes first. Common sense dictates that 100 comes before 200. So then the one that was actually most famous in the Middle East, which is Sakhr AX170, that was basically found in most homes in the Middle East. Again, with a bunch of MSX cartridge games, Castle and Castle Excellence, the River Raid games, and some of them were actually published by the Alamiya company, which is a Kuwaiti company here in the Middle East. Then we have a couple of Arabic games, basically, that again were published mainly by the Alamiya company. And here we have Sakhr AX2300 or 230, which is red in color, and another version of it which is gray in color. For some reason, the red one was much more expensive than the gray one. They both have 30 programs pre-installed on them, but the red one, it was called the Fiery Sakhr. And here we have an MSX cassette player that can be used with any MSX console, to be honest. And here we have a couple of editions of Sakhr MSX. Well, the first one is 350 and the second one is 350 and 2, or the Latin number 2. Basically they are the same. I think the 350 and number 2 in Latin was just a couple of modifications to the original one. Then here we have the AX370. Again, the 350 and the 370 both have disk inputs that you can use, and they had the extensions that you can, it's the same as the Commodore basically. And here we have the AX200. I think it also had the input for disks or something. I forgot what's the name of it. Anyway, then we have the AX150 version of the first MSX, not MSX2, it's the MSX1. Again, was kind of famous in the Middle East, not as much as the AX170. Then the perfect cassette player. Then on top of that, a couple of cassette games with the Joy-Con for the MSX consoles, and a couple of disc games. Then we have the AX990, which is a very unique console because it had a cartridge opening for MSX cartridges, and then it had another cartridge opening for SIG, which is one letter away from Sega, and actually it plays the Sega Mega Drive games on the MSX. They had three computers, 330, 660, and 990. I have the last one. Then another variation that was released only in Saudi Arabia or by a Saudi Arabian company that was called Perfect Al Mithali. They have MSX1. And they have Al Mithali 2 or the Perfect 2, which is basically an MSX 2. And another variation of the Sakhr was basically produced or released in Libya that was called Al Fatih. It was just a variation of the Outshell, but the Mithali, the Perfect, actually it was made in Saudi Arabia. It had a lot of accessories, the disc, the cassettes, whatever it was unique for the Perfect or Al Mithali. While Al Fatih, like you can see now, is basically a modification of the AX170, the first Fatih, which was called Al Fatih 100. And the Al Fatih 123, which is the second Al Fatih, basically was a change in design of the MSX AX230, the Sakhr 230, with the same pre-installed program. So the same design, same everything, you just change the name Sakhr to Al Fatih, and it was released in Libya. So again, there you have it, the Sakhr, the Mithali, and the Al Fatih variations of the home computer. Then we have the computers that were used in governmental institutes, in hospitals, and schools, which the first one was Sakhr, the MSX 1100, with a mouse and keyboard, which are very rare to find. The mouse especially is very rare to find. And the CRT that was used with the Sakhr 1100, basically it was a computer screen, nothing fancy about it. Then this was an MSX1. Then the MSX2 version of it was Sakhr AX500. It was an MSX2. The weight of the keyboard on that thing is amazing. That keyboard weighs a lot. It's very, very, very heavy. It's almost as heavy as the computer itself. And again, because of that, it's very rare to find the keyboard itself. I couldn't find a mouse for it though. Then the screen is an RGB screen that was made by Sakhr for that specific computer. And again, for those of you who know CRTs, RGB is one of the best CRTs, one of the best modes of that CRT. Then we have the first electronic Quran that was released by Al Alamiya as a cartridge for the MSX computers 1 and 2, and literally it was the first electronic computer. Then we had a couple of electronic computers. The first one that was released on CD was the one on Telelaser, the CDI console, and they were bragging that you can play Quran on the TV for the first time. Well, I'm not sure it's the first time, as MSX has released it like 10 years before that, but the Sakhr company has released it 10 years before that, but they are claiming that it's the first time. But I do believe it's the first on CD. Then those two lovely computers, the EPC and the EPC2, which is basically Taiwanese computers that became very popular in Egypt and North Africa for some reason. They are educational computers that can actually play Famicom games. Not NES games, Famicom games. So people used to buy them just to play Famicom games on a portable screen. So just hook it to whatever electricity plug you have, and you have your screen, and the kids are away from the TV. So that, I think that's why it was so popular. So I've never seen them in any collector's channel before, but I think that they were localized here in the Middle East and they were famous in Taiwan. So I don't watch Taiwanese gaming channels, but they were a lovely addition to the collection. So again, this is the cabinet that has the Sakhr computer from the first one all the way up to the last one that was released 990. Now away from the Middle Eastern style of MSX computers, now to the international ones. And the most famous one of them all is the Commodore 64. I have the PAL version with the cassette player and the disc player. So again, the Commodore was not really that famous, at least in Saudi Arabia, but it was kind of famous. People know it, but MSX was the famous one. Yeah. Then we have the Sinclair, the ZX81, the Sinclair Spectrum, and the Sinclair 2 Plus, the one that comes with the cassette player already attached to it, the ZX Spectrum Plus 2, I mean, and then the ZX Spectrum Plus 3 that comes with the disc player already installed to it. Those were famous in, again, North Africa and mainly in Egypt. If you ask an Egyptian about the Sinclair, they know it. So again, I think it was MSX with the Sakhr computers, followed by Sinclair, and finally the Commodore. And here is the first and last Sega computer that was released, the SC3000H. It plays, if I'm not mistaken, the Mark 1, Mark 2, and Mark 3 games, or at least the Mark 1 games. I'm pretty sure about the Mark 1 games. So it was the first trial by Sega, and I think the last. Then Atari tried their hand on the home computers with the Atari XE, if I'm not mistaken, that had a couple of attachments about keyboard and mouse. Then the Atari 800 and 800 XL. The one I have is the 800 XL, and the Atari 65 ST. Is it ST or XE? I'm not sure. I think it's XE. The Atari here, it's 65 XE. In the Middle East, it was called the Atari Najm, basically the Atari Star. So that tells you that that version was a little bit famous in the Middle East. If it got its own name, it was a little bit famous. Then the MSX, the first MSX that was released in North America, basically it was sold as a musical tool rather than a computer, the CX5M, and it came with a keyboard. That's why I'm saying it was released or marketed as a musical tool, because the Commodore and the Texas Instruments had basically the big market share in the stores and with the public. So MSX did not really thrive in the US. The Magnavox Odyssey 2, which was released again in North America, and the PAL version, which was called the Philips or the G7000 Philips. Again, basically it's a Magnavox, but released in PAL countries with a couple of games and controllers on top of it. Underneath those is a random MSX that I found interesting because it was very cheap, so I had to own it. And next to it is the Texas Instruments. I only have one version of the Texas Instrument with a couple of educational games. The one I have is the TI 99-4A. I think that one is the most famous one that was in the US. Again, I didn't live there at that time, so I'm not sure. I just follow what the internet says. So the internet says TI 99-4A was the most common version. Again, with a couple of educational games for the computer. And on top of that cabinet, on top of all those computers, of course, I have the best game ever, which is World of Warcraft, the original version, the first one that was released, and the extension, the expansion, the Burning Crusades. Unfortunately, those are the only two I have on discs. The other I downloaded. Then behind them, the Lego Super Mario game basically, and the DC Cinematic Universe up to the Phase 3, the end of Phase 3, and Disney Encyclopedia and Dagger that was owned by my father. So it's not sharp, it's actually dull, but it was given as a gift. Then next to that is the cassette player that I had in my childhood and still functional, with a couple of cassette series that I used to do to hear basically the legacy of Prophet Muhammad, the legacy of a couple of prophets, the history of Islam. I used to have those always playing in the background when I'm playing any like football game or wrestling or whatever that doesn't need me to listen to the dialogue. I used to have those in the background. Then a couple of books, the Joker Endgame comic book, which I like, the DC Encyclopedia. This is a magazine for kids, basically a comic book magazine that was called Majid. My son is named Majid, named after Captain Tsubasa, which is in Arabic called Captain Majid. I love that character. He plays soccer, so whenever I found a comic book that has the name Majid and soccer in it, I had to buy it. And next to it, you saw the Marvel Encyclopedia and the magnificent Deadpool figure, and the Pandora's Box arcade stick, which I bought from AliExpress basically. Then in the shelf underneath that, I have the couple of Naruto, a couple of Islamic books and about history, and the FIFA 98 handheld game, Tiger, I think by Tiger Electronics. A Pokemon encyclopedia, and a couple of very early handheld releases. Again, they are very primitive, basically consoles or games or toys, whatever you want to call them, where you had a car or an airplane that follows some lights and there's a scroll inside. And these are my cell phones, from the first cell phone I had until the one I'm recording the video on. But again, these are a couple of Nokias that I had, and underneath those, again, a couple of encyclopedias or books with a Polaroid camera, instant camera. And this is the Siemens cell phone that my father, may he rest in peace, he bought when they were first released in Saudi Arabia, and a walkie-talkie that was very long distance. And then a couple of BlackBerry phones and Pepsi-shaped radio. It actually still works. And again, the Polaroid camera. It works, but I don't have the film for it. But it's nice. I love those cameras, those instant cameras. Underneath that, I have my laptop collections. My laptops collection basically includes my laptops that I had and my wife's laptop. So the first one is the Fujitsu Siemens. My father had to buy it for me when I joined college. Then the white Dell and the black Dell. I'm not sure what the number of the computer is. Then a couple of laptops for that my wife had, and a couple of cell phones that basically the family had, and they gave it for me to display. And the iPod. That iPod was in the car 24/7. That iPod was a lifesaver at sometimes. And of course, the Sony Walkman that my brother had, then he gave to my sister, and finally she gave to me. But the one that I actually had was the Discman, the Sony Discman. That one player was, again, before the iPod, it was a lifesaver in the car. Then the iPod came and it took his place. Underneath those, again, a couple of encyclopedias with a couple of Samsung and LG Android phones. And beneath those is a couple of, again, encyclopedias, cassette collections, and a couple of iPhones. This is the model of a truck that we always used to have in the streets here in Saudi Arabia. That design, that graffiti, that whatever you want to call it, it was very unique to those trucks, and it was everywhere. Now you rarely see it, but it was everywhere, so I had to add it to the collection. And the second arcade machine by Arcade 1UP is the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles one, which is lovely, which is a really lovely game. And the third one, again by Arcade 1UP, is I think this one is the Capcom Legacy one, and the other one is the Bandai Namco one. Either way, this one that has the Street Fighter games and a bunch of other games. So in total in this room, there are 3 Arcade 1UP cabinets. And in the middle, I have 2 cabinets with 2 pinball games on top of them, the Spider-Man one and Toy Story one, which have a lot of games. And what I did was basically there are some like game hangers or holders that are sold in Amazon. You have to put on walls. I put them on the side of the cabinets with that, so I got some space for extra games, and for the games that I usually use for the newer consoles, the PS4, the PS5, the Xbox, the Switch, and the older games are in the cabinet themselves. Usually I don't go collecting for older games. I collect for newer consoles, to be honest. But again, I collect what I find. As simple as that. Here I have a couple of old games, couple of Mega Drive games, a couple of Super Nintendo and Nintendo 64 games, inbox, and a couple of CDI games, PS3 games, and some collector's editions for the PS4 and PS5 games, and again the same holder for the Switch games on the wall. I'm not a big Amiibo fan, but see the Super Mario one, the Chibi Robo one. I forgot what's that guy named, the black guy, the black silhouette. I forgot what it's called, but again, those caught my eye. Then a couple of keychains and the the Nintendo Power magazine with Batman, because I love Batman. And again, a couple of VHS tapes of what I call the comedy theater, Egyptian comedy theater. And this one is an anime that was translated into Arabic. It's called Ninja. I think in Japan it's called Kabamaru Egano or something like that. Then of course Captain Majid, which is known as Captain Tsubasa all over the world. I think Captain Oliver in Italy or something. But here in the Middle East it's known as Captain Majid. One of the best sports animes you'll ever find. I know there are better. For me it's the best. And again, continuing the keychains of the old anime cartoons, and of course finally the Friends keychain. So now this is the second room, and before we enter the second room, on the right and on the left, again the same holders that I drilled in the wall with the PS3 games that are basically move games. That's on the right side. On the left side, we have the PS4 games that are VR games, the Switch games that need movement, and on the bottom, a couple of Xbox Connect games and Xbox 360. And again, I'm not a magazine collector, but the Nintendo Powers that had the wrestling games features in the cover, I had to have them. So these are the 4 Nintendo Power magazines. And again, my wrestling figures collection. The poster in the back was custom made. I collected a couple of photos. I went to the printer. I made it in poster format, not in canvas. So actually I can post it on the wall. And of course, the WWE Championship with the Stone Cold Steve Austin, the Generation X, The Undertaker, The Rock, Batista, Eddie Guerrero, Ric Flair. Again, you will see, I will not name all the wrestlers, but you will see a lot of wrestlers being repeated. Those are the ones that I love the most. And a couple of board games there on the left side. And again, we have 3 cabinets. Each cabinet is divided into 2 shelves, basically. In the top shelf of the first cabinet, it has the Elimination Chamber wrestling ring with a couple of wrestling Funko Pops at the front of it, and some figures, and the Booty-O's cereal box at the back. Then the second ring is the SmackDown one with the traditional new steel cage, again with a bunch of wrestlers that are not that old, except for the 4 Horsemen and Sting. The others are not that old. And with again some wrestlers around the ring. The second cupboard, or the second cabinet, sorry, there are a bunch of wrestling figures from the recent years, and the blue ring with the wrestlers in it from 1996. The black one is from 1998 or 99, if I'm not mistaken, with the wrestlers in it from the same era. So those are really old. The other ring is one of the recent ones with the steel cage on top, or the shark cage, I think they call it, with a bunch of wrestlers from the new era. But those 2 rings were actually, the black one and the blue one, are very old. Then the centerpiece of all the cabinets is the Raw, Monday Night Raw ring, with most of the popular wrestlers in it and around it. Again, I will not be able to name all the wrestlers, but again, you can see that Shawn Michaels and Undertaker are being repeated frequently, and Steve Austin, of course. Then this is Joy from the Pixar movie Inside Out, which has nothing to do with wrestling, but it was the first gift that my wife gave me. And when she put it in this place, so I kept it in this place, never moved it from that ring. Now it's displayed in the gaming room. In the third cabinet, we have the Hell in a Cell ring, with a couple of moments. You can see that Shane McMahon on the left side, Mankind or Mick Foley on the right side, where they dropped from the top of the cage and hit the table. The Mankind one was much better than the Shane McMahon one. Then you have the WrestleMania ring at the bottom with the legends, basically the legendary wrestlers: Hulk Hogan, Hot Rod, Roddy Piper, Macho Man, Ric Flair, Stone Cold, of course, and that moment where Shawn Michaels won the ladder match in SummerSlam, not in WrestleMania, I know, but I love Shawn Michaels. I don't love Razor Ramon that much, so I have to feature Shawn Michaels. Again, those are my wrestling figures, and of course the WWE Championship and the life-size cutout of the Undertaker. Then those shelves, we have the Lego Dimensions piece sets. Not all of them. I did not collect all the play sets, unfortunately, but I collected the ones that matter. The Harry Potter one, the Ghostbuster ones, the Simpsons one, the DC Comics one. Those are the ones that matter to me most, so I collected them. Then we have the fourth arcade cabinet, the one by, again, Arcade 1-Up, the Mortal Kombat one, that has the 3 Mortal Kombat games and the stool for it. I only have one stool for my child, that's it. And the fifth arcade cabinet is the Golden Axe one. I put it next to the wrestling cabinets because it has the game Wrestle War. So that's the only one in the Arcade 1-Up lineup that has a wrestling game, so I had to put it next to the wrestling cabinet and cabinet. It's in the middle of them. Now this is the other wrestling cabinet, which is not figures, which is video games. It has a couple of figures, but it's mainly video games. So on top of it, we have like a 32-inch Hulk Hogan and a 32-inch John Cena figures, a couple of collector's editions of WWE 2K14 and 16, a couple of collector Funko Pops, a couple of books, basically the encyclopedias of the Attitude Era, the Undertaker comic. For some reason, there's an Undertaker comic book. And then those are the DX sticks that I got when we went to the wrestling show that came to Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. I think it was Crown Jewel. And then this is Tiger Mask, which is known in Arabic as Al-Namr al-Muqanna. It was a very famous anime cartoon, whatever you want to call it, here in the Middle East. Again, Tiger Mask is famous everywhere, but here it was very famous. It was one of the reasons why I love wrestling so much. And then we have the tank controller that has nothing to do with wrestling, but it's the biggest controller ever made for a Steel Battalion game on the original Xbox. And this is the only place where I can actually display it easily. So again, it's a piece of history. Then a couple of collector's edition. Now, this cabinet, before I go on and talk about each shelf, this cabinet contains all the wrestling games that were released in the US, in the Middle East, and most of the wrestling games that were released in Japan. Again, there's no way to collect them all. They are just too much. The games in Japan, I mean. But the WWE games, the WCW games, the ECW games, all the collector's editions that were released for the newer games or the older games, they are all here displayed in this cabinet. For example, here you see the Ric Flair edition. And here you see the SmackDown, the WWE 2K22 edition that was released only in Australia with the Rey Mysterio mask. Here we have the SmackDown games from the PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 eras, which is specifically SmackDown Here Comes the Pain is the best wrestling game, period. I'm not a No Mercy fan. I like No Mercy, but basically Here Comes the Pain was my childhood with my friends, so that game will always have a special place in my heart. So again, going back to the wrestling games collection, those are every single wrestling game that was released. Again, they don't have to be licensed. You'll see now some games that are not licensed. Basically, they are random games, random wrestling games, but again, all the games that were released in the US and North America and the Middle East are, with the addition of the Engage one, which was very hard to find. I only was able to find it in Italy for some reason. Complete in box and sealed, so it's there. And here are the vintage ones. In this shelf, you can see the vintage wrestling games that only WWF has licensed games. The others are very random games. And the first wrestling game to ever be released was the pro wrestling game on the Sega Mark I. I think it was released in 1985, if I'm not mistaken. So again, it was not a WWF game, it was just a random game. Then, in this shelf, we have every game for Captain Tsubasa that was released on Famicom or on the Game Boys or the Super Nintendo or the PlayStations or the GameCube or recently the PlayStation 4 with the collector's editions. The figure that you see in the back is from that collector's edition. This keychain is not from any collector's edition. But again, all the Captain Tsubasa games are here, the Captain Marvel games. It was very famous in the Middle East. Again, it has a very special place in my heart. I named my son after him. So yeah, again, here are some non-licensed, basically wrestling games, including the Simpsons game, and a couple of WWE recent games, with a couple of plug and plays and handhelds. And here are the Japanese wrestling games, the PC Engine games, the PlayStation games, the Super Nintendo games, the Saturn, whatever console you think of, they have a wrestling game on it. So again, those are very hard to find, very hard to collect for. Some of them are named in Japanese and they cannot read Japanese. But again, I have most of the ones that matter. Then here are the Def Jam series, the Vendetta, the Fight for New York, and the Iconic one. A couple of random Blu-rays. And the rest of the Japanese wrestling games with the TNA Impact games because there were nowhere else to put them. And finally, the last shelf that includes wrestling is the arcade stick that was released with the All-Star game. Again, it's a wrestling theme one, so I had to have it. Here we have a couple of special editions, the Assassin's Creed one, the first one ever, the PlayStation 3 version, and the Tomb Raider one, the survival kit, the Xbox 360 version with the figure, and for some reason the Uno cards with the Mario characters. And the last shelf in that cabinet is a lot of tennis games. I love tennis games, especially the Top Spin series. So whatever tennis game I can find, I buy it and I just put it in that shelf. So a lot of tennis games since the Atari days, since the MSX days until the PS5 days. And on the wall next to it, we have a big collection of light guns. And on top of those is the Tamagotchi, the old one, the Chinese version, and the original Tamagotchi that was released as a celebration of 20 years. And next to it is the spill of books that was released for the PlayStation 3. Beneath them, or underneath them, is the light guns, the first one that was ever released for the Magnavox Odyssey, and the most recent one that was released for the PlayStation VR, and a bunch of light guns. Some of them you might know or easily figure out, some are a little bit unknown, which is like the ones that were for the Radofen, the black one. I've never seen it before. I've just seen it in an eBay listing and I had to buy it. Then here are the Sinden light guns. Sinden light guns are basically new light guns that were released in 2020 or 2021, and the line for buying them is very long now. The idea is that they work with the new TVs. The TV doesn't have to be a CRT, so that's why the waiting is very long for them. I had to wait like 9 months to get mine. And here are a bunch of, again, other light guns for the PS3 and for the Wii, and the Super Scope for the Super Nintendo. And going back, we have the DJ Hero set, the Renegade version with the stand, and then the Rock Band set, the Beatles version, the drums, the microphone, and of course the guitar, the wired one. And on the other side, we have the Guitar Hero 5 guitar. So if you want to play guitar and bass, you can. And then the dance mats for Dance Dance Evolution, the Xbox 360 version, and the PS2 version. Then on top of this cabinet, we have the steering wheel for the GT PS2 edition, a special edition that was released. And then underneath those, we have the VR, the PSVR, and the Oculus Quest 2. So basically a VR corner of the room. Underneath those, we have the plug and plays, a bunch of them, the SpongeBob one, the Spider-Man one. And of course, every game room needs to have the Virtual Boy. Whether you love it, whether you hate it, you need to have it. It's a virtual reality corner. The first virtual reality console needs to be there. And underneath it, we have another collection of plug and plays, the Star Wars one, Darth Vader, and the either way. And the U-Draw board from for the Xbox 360, sorry, and bunch of plug and plays, the Intellivision one, the Disney Winnie the Pooh one, the Scooby-Doo one, and the Namco one. And underneath that is the pedals, basically, for the Steel Battalion controller. And here we have the Sega Pico, which is again an educational console, but again it's a Sega console, so I need to have it, and a bunch of games. Then on top, in front of it, a couple of arcades, miniature arcades that are actually functional, and some random figures right and left. And the Sony Trinitron CRT with the PlayStation 3, the Ultra Slim version, or whatever that's called, underneath it, and the PlayStation 1. Both of them are modded. And then the PlayStation TV. It's the only TV in the gaming room that is actually a 3D TV, so that's why I have it. And in front of it, all the cameras that you can think of, the Kinect 2, the PS3, PS4 cameras, the sensors for the Wii and Wii U, and here are the sensors for the light guns and the PS2 camera, and of course the Mario Kart Live, the Switch game that has a Mario Kart with a camera where you can create your own course at home or whatever. Then underneath a couple of CRT TVs, we have the Xbox 360, the modded version, the Famicom modded, Wii modded, and the Xbox One, the black one, and the original Switch. Then the other cabinet, the Dreamcast steering wheel on top of it, and underneath it, the first shelf has the very old handhelds that were Chinese made that had 99 games or something. Then the Sega Game Gear, and of course the Sega Nomad. And then the Game Boys, the first ever Game Boy, M-Box, clear box, and the Game Boy Color, I like the translucent one. The Game & Watch, that was a Nintendo Club exclusive, which is basically the first Game & Watch game ever. The Game Boy Advance, the original one, and the two versions of the SP one, and the new Game & Watches that were released for Mario and Zelda. Then here's the Neo Geo Pocket, and the Atari Lynx, and the PC Engine GT, again, which is another handheld that plays console games. And then the Wonder Swan, which was not famous at all here in the Middle East or in the US. It's a Japanese console and still a Japanese console. The N-Gage, which was a little bit famous here. And again, I just bought the N-Gage because I had to play the wrestling game. And then the shelf underneath that, we have the PSP collection and the PS Vita handheld, the PSP 1000, the PSP 2000, the Monster Hunter edition, the PSP 3000, the Metal Gear Solid edition, the PSP Go, the white version, and of course the PSP Vita. And underneath that is the Game Boy DS, Nintendo DS, whatever you want to call it, shelf. The original DS, the DS Lite, and then we have the 3DSs and the 2DSs. You obviously can see that I like Pokemon, and I have a lot of Pokemon consoles. Not all of them, but I have some of them. I have the Nintendo 64 one, I have the Switch Lite one of them, there are two, and the 3DS and the 2DS one. So here's the 2DS Pikachu edition, the new 2DS, and the 3DS Pikachu edition. Then underneath those we have the Game & Watch Donkey Kong games, all four of them, from the 1980s and 1990s. Then the Donkey Kong drums, of course, the Eye of Judgment game, a couple of Buzz-It controllers, and the Scene-It Xbox 360 game. Then on the wall next to that is a couple of gaming accessories, a couple of accessories for the PlayStation Move, the Guitar Hero portable small tiny guitar, and the accessories for the Guitar Hero and Band Hero games on the DS, a couple of WonderSwan games, the steering wheels for the Switch and the Wii, and the tennis rackets for the Switch. And then the Ring Fit box with the Ring Fit on the bottom, and of course the Nintendo Labo. Again, the VR kit for the Labo, I needed to have it because again I have a VR corner. And the other 3 versions of the Nintendo Labo, I didn't really open them because the cardboard is very fragile, I guess, so I don't want to ruin it. So when my son gets a little bit older, he will play with them. And here on this cabinet, on top of it is a couple of memorabilia from areas we visited, Turkey, India, Egypt, blah blah blah, or some stuff that were gifted to us by other people. I just like the Turkish band with the Kulthum in the middle and the dancer. It's nice. But the main feature of the cabinet is that it has all the Disney Infinity figures. All the characters, from Disney Infinity 1 to Disney Infinity 2, with the special edition, and Disney Infinity 3. Thank God I was able to collect them all before they went out of stock or went out of basic manufacturing. So all the characters from all the 3 Disney Infinity games, the whole series, is here in this cabinet with the levels, the extra levels, and whatever you can find. I wasn't really keen on collecting all the discs and the power-ups because there are a lot of them, but I collected as much as I can. So again, this is one of my joys in life, that I have all the Disney Infinity figures. And finally, here is the Logitech PS4, PS5, PS3 steering wheel, which I have the adapter for that can actually play. You can use it to play on the Xbox and Xbox Series S and X with a chip. So that was the tour of the 2 gaming rooms. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you have any comments, please write it in the comments down below. This video took a lot of time to make. Sorry about my English, basically. It's not my first language. Again, if the camera was a little bit shaky, I'm not used to that kind of video shooting. But hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Hopefully it was a fun tour, a unique tour. Again, a lot of stuff that is unique to me personally and stuff that's unique to the Middle East. So hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Please like, share, and subscribe. And hopefully you stick around for the next videos. Thank you so much.